Welcome to episode 3 of At the Catch. Today's guest is Greg Perry, who you might know by his rival name, the Lifesaver. You'll hear the story of how the Lifesaver is actually what he named his rowing machine, and how that machine actually played a part in saving his life. It's a great story you won't want to miss. We'll also discuss tips and tricks for getting perfect post workout hair for your sweaty Saturday selfie, and what lessons you might learn from doing the same 50-minute workout 450 times in a row. All this and more as we get ready to row on At the Catch. All right, welcome to another episode of At the Catch. This week we have a guest from way up north. Greg Perry joins us from Maine. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, I'm glad to see that you've combed your hair. We're used to seeing you with a little bit crazier hair. Everyone knows you as a star of Sweaty Selfie Saturday. I don't know how many times your image has been out there, but it's pretty legendary.
Great.
Do you have any product that you use, or is it's all sweat, just the right amount of salt sweat?
It really is. I guess there's probably a little bit of product left over from the day before, and then I have not showered by the time I rode, and then a lot of sweat, and then a lot of wiping. I've got towels set up so that I can't stand having a drenched face. So I one arm row at least, a handful of times to do some swiping. So I think in the process, that's my final product.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Greg.
From Maine, up here in Portland, it's 18 degrees out here today. So it's a chilly one. Born and raised here. And as far as rowing goes, I grew up a rower. I grew up a rower in the traditional sense. So I got in a dinghy and went from the beach to my boat, and then spent a lot of time in the islands. And I was an only child. I rowed around, had my dog in the dinghy, and so I always just loved rowing. Never did anything competitively with it, and so fast forward, I guess 40 years here, and I ran into a situation where I was a bit of a reclamation project. 40 years of deferred maintenance and a little bit gluttonous, and I was 240 pounds, and it was time to make a change. And so I was in a rough spot, and they told me to back off, and I decided I wanted to start rowing. And so Ergatta was my choice. And as I said to you earlier, I kind of named the machine after what I pictured it being, which was Lifesaver for me. And so I started rowing, got after it, and the rest of it's kind of been history. I think I'm sneaking up on 8 million meters, and I still love it as much as I did the first day.
Wow. So I was looking back some of your posts, and it was back in, this is May of 2022. You kind of told your backstory, which a lot of people have seen this. I'm just going to read it for those that haven't. This was a little over a year ago. You were told that you had, between your fatty liver, iron overload, excessive lifestyle, you developed chronic pancreatitis, diabetes, and stage 1 cirrhosis. Your doctor told you, this is not good. This is not going to last. You're not going to last for long, which I can't imagine being told. Told to enjoy your remaining time, take it easy, and not stress your body.
Yeah.
Really do that. You didn't follow this advice.
You're in a tough spot. I grew up a kind of an active guy, even though I just said that I had, 40 years of deferred maintenance. It's not completely accurate. And I played a lot of hockey, and I was a team sport guy. I didn't like sitting around. I think that I played hard. I worked hard, a little bit of everything. And so I'm a commercial real estate broker. It was kind of a wild life. And at the same time, though, I've got a beautiful daughter, I've got a fiance, I got a lot going on. And I hit kind of a rough spot where I had no idea it was coming. Ended up in a hospital, and I didn't like the choices that they gave me. So I'm not recommending it for anyone else. I don't think it was necessarily the right choice, but the concern was the added pressure on my arteries, um, on my system could be a concern. If I popped a leak, I might not be able to kind of patch it up if it was internal. And so there's concern about that. And that happens with anybody with cirrhosis. And it's just a risk. But what they didn't understand, and he had me involved with I was on a transplant list, the whole story, was that exercise kind of stretched out, but then rebounded all of those vessels and arteries and built some muscle memory. So I started rowing quietly, and as they started to see things improve, I started to kind of let it out a bit more that I was involved with rowing. But I'd say I rowed 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and I wouldn't say I was completely accurate with them. And then I just started upping my protein. I had nutritionists. You get a pretty good team when you're given a short
Mm-hmm.
um, life sentence like that. So I had a great team of people and great support with my family, and so everything kind of came together. So yeah, in the process of all that, they found that the exercise was really a benefit to me, and rowing in particular because it's so low impact was one of the few things that they'd allowed me to do. And over a course of a very quick period of time, I lost quite a bit of weight. Started eating right. Obviously, I haven't had a drink in 3 years. I haven't had pizza in 3 years, or red meat. So, there was some major changes that I had to go through, but rowing was kind of the piece that became consistent for me. I row every day. I row 50 minutes, and it took probably a year before I was willing to tell them exactly what I was doing. But I'm not on a transplant list anymore,
Wow.
and I've got some major scarring. I'm going to have to deal with a lot of stuff for a long time, but I'm in the best health of my life, and it worked out for me.
Wow. So same doctors through all this process?
Yes. Yeah, I had a great gastroenterologist up here in Portland, and then I was with Leahy down in Mass. Still am. I still see them on regular checkups, and I was very lucky to have the transplant specialist down in Leahy. He was a very active guy, bike rider actually. Did a lot of running as well, but kind of understood my position and the feeling of I just can't go drink and sure, take it easy and kind of just enjoy what I have left. It didn't fit well for me, and I think he understood it. And so I think he kind of looked past a few things. He knew I was rowing. I think he knew I was eating a lot more protein than I was supposed to. It's harder on your liver in theory, but not if you're active and burning it. So he played a pretty big role as well, but it just all kind of started to come together.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that's right there. That's such an inspiring story. I think that they need to take one of your sweaty Saturday selfies and put it up in the clinic as a testament to what good diet, exercise can do. That's just remarkable.
It was lucky. I mean, honestly, uh, a lot of it was just timing and still having enough of a body left there to make something work. And then, having people I care about, that certainly, kept me going the whole way through. But it's a part of my life now, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. And it's a little bit insane to some extent at this point, but it manages my diabetes and it just helps with a bunch of different things. So it's going to be a part of my life for sure.
Wow. Well, I noticed, it was last week you put out a post referencing your insulin pump. Do you have
Yeah.
people reach out to you, other diabetics, and go one-on-one with other folks?
Well, it's a unique process for me. I didn't start out a type 1 diabetic. I earned it, through my liver failure. So I'm in a bit of a different boat, but I don't produce insulin. So it's challenging. It was another part of the navigation process. I had no idea what I was doing when it all started. This is again 3 years ago, and you kind of start to learn how to manage it, although you still fail on a regular basis. I eat fruit pies my entire first summer. I had diabetes, thinking that fruit was better for me than eating all the chocolate I used to eat. So it's all kind of a learning curve and a process, but But one of the challenges with rowing in particular is that you have to stack carbs. So, uh, for me, if I stack, and I say stack, but if I eat somewhere in the area of 70 or 80 grams of carbs, I can get through an hour long workout. My alarms start to go off. I have a Dexcom on this side that is a constant glucose monitor. And then I have the pump on this side, as I mentioned, but I would start to hear the alarms go off at about 40 minutes. I do a 50-minute row, and it's a challenge. So between goo gels and fluids and different things. And I've had to kind of play around with uh, different types of carbs, slower acting carbs, fast acting carbs, and need an immediate burst because I'm sitting at 100, my blood sugar. And so it's a science. What the pump has been great at has been just kind of leveling things off for me so that I don't have as much of ups and I don't have as much of downs either. So now I'm eating a little bit less healthier food before I row, and I'm drinking more fluids that have some. It's called, I think right now I'm using Tailwind, which I love. It's got a little bit of sugar in it, but in a healthy way. And I guess that doesn't make a ton of sense, but it is for me. It gets me through my rows, and I'm not stacking out as much carbs because as soon as I finish a row, I have to hit insulin because you have a post row high,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of your endorphins or whatever it may be. It's probably a better way to put it, but that kind of kick in. So yeah, it's a crazy process. And people that row or do anything that's a fairly long endurance have to kind of learn the ins and outs of it. And so I guess the long answer is yes, there have been a lot of people that have reached out that are very curious. I think it's not until you start getting into the longer rows and the higher endurance stuff where you're really burning hard that you run into it. But if you're getting up in the morning and you're rowing and you're diabetic, it's a different process than it is for anyone else.
Okay. Okay. So going back to the beginning of your rowing journey, what was your class at first?
I was a class 7,
Okay.
and I was barely a class 7. I squeaked in, I think. So I can't remember exactly what my splits were, but they were in the mid twos or, 225, 230, somewhere in that area. I got the Ergatta. It arrived on January 13th. And I had COVID. And I was 3 days into COVID, and that thing arrived, and it was a big deal for me, with everything going on in my health. And then I was waiting through COVID. So I got on there as soon as I was healthy enough, and I calibrated, and I struggled at 7 for a little while there. It was a solid month or so before I even started to creep up with calibrations. So yeah, I started pretty rough.
And you eased into it though. You didn't put in huge workouts. You were just
No, I was pretty methodical with it. I didn't have a science to it. I'm certainly not a spreadsheet guy by any means, but I started out with 10-minute workouts, 15-minute workouts. I think I did. The longest workout was 37-minute catch a wave, or I think it was something along those lines, which I started rowing quite a bit. And then you get more comfortable. I see people jump in pretty heavy, and I'm surprised. I'm not sure how long they can sustain it. But for me, it was gradual. Where I kind of reached my limit was 50 minutes. For me, it's in a day's row. That's about as much as I want to do, and as much as I would probably recommend, quite frankly. But it works for me. I feel pretty comfortable with it. It's a little longer. I'd love to shorten it up, to be perfectly honest. If I could find a 45 or 40-minute row that would give me roughly 14,000 meters, then I'd be all for it. And I'd probably push a little harder too, but I haven't found it.
well, if you're doing 14,000 meters in 45 minutes,
In 50 minutes, I'm doing 14,000 in 50 minutes.
yeah.
I'm not there, but the process has been a lot of fun. The calibration process has been a lot of fun. So it's worked out well.
So it's been slow and steady.
Yeah. So I mean, I calibrated, I'm a big fan of the auto calibration system, and I've seen a lot of comments back and forth about it and whether it works or doesn't work. And, for me, it was perfect. But I think that you have to pick a program that the calibration's challenging if you're just kind of running around. And I'm not saying what I did was the right way to do it, but if you're doing races and you're doing push programs and you're doing all the different fun functions of the system, it kind of confuses it as far as where your class is and then where your splits are. For
Mhm.
me, I picked programs that had a lot of bonuses, a lot of active rests, a lot of opportunity for me to kind of exceed the average that's expected for the class. And the calibration system, yeah, it's not to say you can trick it, uh, but 50-minute onward and upward, which I've heaped praises on for a long time now. If I row that on an average pace and hit all of the, stay between the lanes the whole way through, I won't calibrate. I will not move up in calibration. And that's kind of what I think people end up in with it as far as ruts go, is that they're hitting the program where they need to hit the program. But onward and upward has all these bonuses, has all these active rests, and then it tails off with a finish that's a 3-minute finish at whatever the slowest pace is. I should know that, but it gives me the opportunity to spring it out if I want it at the end. And so when it turns around and looks at my efforts, it shows that I'm above average for that program for my class. And so I would just keep auto calibrating. And every time I did, I would typically go up, and it would go up by a few seconds. I wouldn't go up by a class.
Mhm.
I would go up by a few seconds in every segment. And I figured that every 3 or so, maybe 4 months, I would go up a class is what it seemed to work out to. Uh, and then eventually, yeah, I got to class one, and then I made the tough decision, fairly recently, to stop out auto calibrating, which was a difficult decision, but I think it was probably the right one. Um, it's just been kind of a change of mindset.
Okay. So, when was the first time you did 50 minutes onward and upwards?
And I just hit 450 rows on it. So I row pretty much every day. So, roughly a year and a half ago,
Okay.
or whatever the math would be for that. So that program just works for me, and Andy built it, and boy, it's funny how well it's worked for me. And, so yeah, I've wrote it 450 times, which is kind of crazy. And I understand why people would look at that and say that just makes no sense. You got all these options on Ergatta. You don't race, you don't do open row. I've open rowed maybe 45 minutes out of 8 million meters. I've raced maybe 5 or 6 races. I think they're fun. In fact, races get me kind of wound up and my heart starts racing, and I push it a little harder than I probably should. But I enjoy all that. What I've found really beneficial is just being able to see the growth. I've heard comments about getting motivation, and how do you get up each day and find a way to get motivated, especially like after the row you guys just did, the row to mortar. I understand that, but for me, I can see exactly what I've done every single day, and I can see how well I've done each consecutive day because it's been the exact same program. I can see my splits change, power average change. And it's been fun to watch that growth. And it's been, a fairly dramatic curve over the course of a 2-year period. And now it's flattened, which is hard for me a little bit. But it's the rowing of the same program has been the motivation. I had a goal of hitting 285 average power, or 295 or 300 was a big goal for me, and hitting a certain split level. But it's not going to be the same if you're rowing different programs.
Mhm.
The program's going to create a different average split for me. So the only way that I can kind of go back to the holy grail for me, it's onward and upwards, because I can see where my growth is. And that's, every time I see results, it's kind of exciting to kind of see where I am from a growth standpoint on every aspect. And oddly enough, now I've worked at reducing my power a little bit, finding a lower average power, not because I don't want to be powerful, but because I realize that those major swings going from, from a paddle up to a sprint, I need to do it more gradually. I don't want to torque my body so quickly. So I find a way, partly because I know the program as well as I do, but I know when I can advance into it a little bit better so that I'm not torquing quite as hard. So I try to fit into about a 300 average now on that program when I used to push for a 310 or a 315. But it's just allowed me to kind of set different goals in the process of running on the same program.
So, having done it so many times, I mean, well, you're tied. There's a 52-way tie for first place.
You're
You're
right, is there? I've never even looked.
proud proud member of that.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, how many times do you hit the high score? And like, I'm feeling a little off. I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna be you kinda know where you're gonna end up?
Yeah, I know every day. It's funny. I can in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the row, I can tell you if I'm going to be anywhere near a personal record, just by how easy the water starts moving for me. And
Mhm.
you probably understand this, right? But some days it almost feels like the water's heavy, and you're just a little bit off, and you can feel it right in the early parts of the paddle. It's like, wow, is there something going on? Do I have some additional resistance? But yeah, I don't. First of all, to answer your first question, I'm never in the top placing because I miss every meteor at the end. I miss from wherever you think I'd have a better roadmap of the program, but wherever you go into that final sprint, there's a bonus sprint that lasts about a minute, and then it trails off into a paddle where you're supposed to hit every single token. And I sprint it out. I don't always sprint the whole thing out. I can't, quite frankly. I can handle about 2 minutes of sprint, but that's only because I know I'm done, right? I know that I've got nothing else I have to do. And I try to kind of push that. That's that wonderful period in that program for me where whatever I've got left in the tank, I get to kind of get rid of it. And so I hover around 14,000 meters, sometimes a little less, sometimes a bit more, but I'm not calibrating anymore. So I don't expect to get, quite frankly, much higher than that, which again
Mhm.
is a bit of an adjustment for me. But I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at, I think.
Do you ever do the pulse version?
So I don't like pulse workouts, and I'm sorry, or God, I really, I don't know why I don't like them. Maybe just because I wasn't good at them. My fiance was a big pulse rower, and I kind of got her over to Meteor. So I'm not sure if that was just my influence or not, but uh, I'm not a big fan. I find it hard to stay in the zones. I get frustrated when I fall out of them. And then I just in general, I've got shows going. My God, I've been through more series of TV shows. I got news on in the background. I get too much going on to really focus too closely. I've got 50-minute onward and upward, frankly, in the back of my head. Uh,
Mhm.
so I know where I need to be for the most part. I still have to kind of focus through the sprints. There's a long sprint in there in the middle. It's always a pain in the butt. But
Yeah.
but yeah, no, not a big pulse guy.
Well, I challenge you to check it out and let
I
us
know.
know. I mean, it's because you know, last week's guest, Michael, he did a great post about how Pulse and Meteors are completely different workouts, even though same name, same profile, very different. So I know I'm going to do some science here later. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm gonna row Annie's workout later
Good for
today,
it. Yeah.
just for so I have even greater understanding. But I want to plan on doing both, and I'll let you know. And you do the same, and let me know what you thought.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes. It'll be interesting to see what your results were. Jason Platsky got on there, and made it look pretty easy, which is a little disheartening to me, where he crushes everything.
Mhm.
But he got on there with a heck of a split. So, it's a great program. It's fun. You just have to be a little bit insane to do what I do on the side of rowing it. I can't even imagine what the meters are, but I guess if you took 14,000 roughly, or 13.8, 13.9, and multiplied it times 450, it's been a good chunk of my total meters, I guess, at this point.
Absolutely. So 8 million meters. Fantastic. Fantastic. Um. Okay, you've talked about your fiance, and she rows.
Yeah,
Queen Bee.
that's right.
Do you guys have to schedule time on the regatta, or does it just work out for you?
Um, yeah, it does work out mostly because she's flexible and I'm not. Uh, but she certainly has been awesome. Amanda is her name, by the way. But she's been awesome. You know, the wrong thing was me first. You know, it was about my health, and so she took a back seat to it. She kind of rode in the background a little bit, but she's a heck of an athlete in her own right, and really takes care of herself. So it wasn't long before she started rowing a lot more. She does a lot more Pilates stuff afterwards. She does a 40-minute program, I think, every day, and then does, a lot more stretching that I should be doing and a lot more of the other stuff I should be doing. But she comes in after. She's a nurse, and when she finishes her day, she rows at the end of the day. She has to get up so early to row before her work shift that it's just challenging. So I work out in the morning. It happens to work out for us well, and we both get our meters in. And I don't know where she's at now, but she's got 4 million, I think, somewhere in that area. So we put a lot of meters in on the machine.
That's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
and our kids, we've got 2 kids, Kenna and Braille, that are both on there, and they've dabbled, 12 and 15, but they've dabbled and shown some interest and less interest back and forth, but hoping that they catch the bug eventually.
Well, I have 14 and 15-year-old boys, and I wish I could get them to hop on. They did as a novelty early on, but
Right. Kind of what I got too.
kids, they'll learn. They'll learn.
Right. Right.
So what are your plans going forward? How long is this gonna go on? How many more hundreds of times you're gonna do this?
I don't know. I said when I hit 300 on that program that I was gonna stop and move on to something else, and then I swore I was gonna do it at 400. I don't seem to like change very much, and so I don't know. I like what I'm doing. I'm in a good spot. I'd love to write up another program. I might kind of sneak or steal Amanda's program that she never wrote in a million meters, and craft something up with her that was maybe a little bit shorter. As I said, I'd love to get down to about a 40-minute or a 45-minute program. That 14,000 is a little ridiculous, but maybe 13,000 meters or somewhere in that area. I think that would be enough for me daily, and then just kind of adjusting to not calibrating. Now I focus a lot more on working on form, making sure that I maintain a little bit better, rest, which, I mean, I know you've been a proponent for it. It's a challenge for me to take those days off, but um, I think it's just part of the evolving process with the machine. I love every day getting on the thing and trying to figure out what I can work on next, and I do need to spend more time on the other stuff. It's just more me being narrow minded than not appreciating it. I think I'd love getting on in free rowing. I just I need to be able to push myself pretty hard. And I don't know that I can maintain a, 143, 144 split in an open row, because I don't have the mental fortitude for it.
I'm
So
chasing those meteors, yeah. No
yeah,
points.
it's a simple person, I guess. I want to chase the candy, and it works for me. So, uh, I don't know, but I do love, I think the next program is going to be the big step for me. Whatever I decide to move on to, or whatever I craft up with Amanda, I think will be something that I wrote for quite a while, and who knows where that takes me. And then maybe I go back into calibrating. I don't know. I think there's a limit. I mean, that's a question I've kind of always wondered with you. At what point do you stop calibrating? I mean, I assume at some point you must have stopped, right?
I keep it on. I
You
just
do.
let it do its thing. Um, it it adjusts. I mean, I do a lot of open row, um, and it'll adjust me up or down a second occasionally. Sometimes nothing changes.
Yeah.
I I should do more races. I don't. Something I'm working on.
Right.
Um, it's funny, like, as I think when I mean, I started before they had classes, and I think when classes were introduced, I forget where I was. I wanna say maybe a 3, and I don't know if there were many 2s and 1s, and I got to a 2, and then I stayed at a 2 for a long time in the relative scheme of things. And I thought, "Well, I think someone's playing a joke on me. Like, they're never gonna let me move to 1." And I didn't wanna do a manual, and so just one day, out of the blue, it calibrated, and I moved to a 1 and joined the club, and things got much, much harder. Of course, there was a time in there where I remember that my sprint was sub 120, which is insane. And then it was adjusted. I think the algorithms came out and said, "That's not humanly possible for a 7-minute sprint, so we need to dial that back." So now it's 130 something. Um, but yeah, where do you go? I mean, I'm happy at a 1. I I'm looking forward, and, we're very particular as to what are some of the workouts you can even do as a 1, because if the sprints are too long, you
Right.
just pass them by. Um, I've got some ideas that I wanna do for some workouts that will be incredibly hard for 1s, 2s, and 3s, and they would probably be very boring for some of the higher classes, higher numbered classes.
Right.
Do we have to get to a point where is the algorithm gonna be smart enough to adjust some zones for different groups of classes? We'll see. I mean, the product continues to develop and in the right direction, but yeah, 7 minutes at sprint just doesn't sound like a lot of
No,
fun.
it's there's certainly there's some limitations, and that's really what happened to me is that when I got to and I don't have my calibration in front of me, but I think I'm at a 135 or 134 ish somewhere there for a sprint. It's just hard to maintain. It's hard to maintain on a lot of these programs. And I kind of felt like if I went any further and if I kept rolling and pushing 50-minute onward and upward, I was going to keep calibrating upward. It was just kind of the way it was working, despite myself. And this program is harder for me today. Maybe not right now because I've stayed in my calibration now for a few months, but it's as hard now as it was 450 rows ago. If anything, it's harder because to me, the calibration outpaced um, maybe my ability to some extent.
Really.
Yeah, and so it's I remember saying to Amanda, this is like every morning is a killer. I'm getting off this thing. It's like I feel like I've been through a war. And so there's a limit, to as far as the way I row, I guess. I want to row for a long time. There's some blood sugar things. It's important to me. I had to kind of cut it off.
Mhm.
But you're always curious. And then, father time, I'm also 46. Like this is about the as far as I'm going to get, realistically, with rowing. But regardless, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. It seems like, I think there is a point where you have to not dial it back, but just say this might be the top of it.
Well, as Greg LeMond, famous cyclist once said, "It never gets easier, you just go faster." And that applies to this as well.
That's right.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you very much for meeting with us. It was great to hear your story. I know it'll serve as an inspiration to many. Uh, I'm sure that people are going to reach out to you with all sorts of questions for you, and just keep at it. We'll see that fantastic hair on Saturdays.
That's right. I'll still be there. And yeah, no, I did just it's been fun working with you, Brian. And honestly, when I got on the rower, it was you that was leading the pack. So it's funny how it's kind of gotten to this point where we know each other and we all know each other. It's a really cool community. It's been fun to be a part of it and really to watch it evolve even just the last 2 years. It's been a lot of change, but all for the better. And I can't speak highly enough about the community and how much it's helped me through this process. So it's been fun to be here.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, I need to get ready and get rowing. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye bye.